Alright, we're going to do a quick crash course on some torching for a reason here. Never stand in front of your gauges when you crack your bottle open. I just kind of stay behind my lid. I have seen one face blow off through the years. Wasn't pretty. Nobody got hurt, but stay out of the way when you crack those open real slow. Then turn your needle valve on into what you want. Rule of thumb back in the day was 2 to 1 basically. We'll go about 35 anyhow. Same thing here, you want to step aside when you don't stand in front of them. Acetylene, just crack it open about a half turn or so. That way if something happens you can scramble to shut the bottle off. Turn this up to about 10, 15 max. Actually I had a guy one day, one of the helpers in the shop, wrapped up on a job in the field, and he was in the shop and I'm checking a voicemail from him. The stuff that happens, man. Yeah, so I'm checking the message. He's like, hey, big man, had a fire in the shop today. I'm hanging my head thinking, great, here we go, man. Starts mumbling something about his piece of steel must have cut the torch hose, and I didn't turn them off like you said. And then I started welding and caught the hose on fire, and said he tried to stamp it out for like 2 or 3 minutes, and all I could picture was a monkey trying to stamp out a bath towel soaked in gasoline and stamp till the cows come home. He ain't gonna stamp it out. And then I finally realized, turned the bottle off. I was pretty upset from there. Went ahead and went home. Well, of course you did, man. Wouldn't have it any other way. So anyhow, point being of this video is to pass on the technical term of this. And I did a lot of research on this back in the 80s. I actually got lucky enough to run into a couple people from the School of Mines that were metallurgists. And the technical term for oxyacetylene torching is accelerated rusting factor. That's exactly how it's classified. It's classified as an accelerated rusting factor. So that's the main purpose of this, is just to pass that knowledge on. The internet's pretty good at sucking up the basics, but just like Weldor, I did the lit back in the 80s. I know I've been a Weldor since the 80s. Haven't ran into too many people that knew that either, but you know, point being 10, 15 years ago, the internet didn't know what a Weldor was. Word not found, didn't know what it was all about. But as far as this accelerated rusting factor, I mean, a lot of people say you're preheating the steel and you're melting the steel as you're going. And that's just absolute bullshit. And I'm sure anybody that's torched a lot and welding for 35 years, third generation welder, was getting drug around in a welding truck when I was 5. I'm sure anybody that's done a lot of torching can relate to this. You're torching on some heavy stuff, 1.5 inch, 2 inch steel. As your tip gets hot, it gets too hot after hours and hours of just cutting, and it'll actually pop and it'll just blow the flame out. Well, I couldn't count on both hands and feet how many times I've had that happen. Pop, blew the flame out, but I stayed on the oxygen lever and I cut for another 2 feet without a flame. So you can't tell me that it's preheating the steel and, you know, melting it as you're going, because you didn't have a flame for the last 2 feet. There's been a couple times I farted around and intentionally blew it out, pop, stayed on the oxygen lever, and then half a foot or so into it, I leaned over with my other hand and killed the acetylene. And as soon as you kill the acetylene in the picture without the flame, the chemical reaction stops. You're done. So it pertains to that acetylene. I think there's 4 compounds that make up acetylene, but there's something in the acetylene that reacts with the steel and the oxygen, and that's why it's classified technically as an accelerated rusting factor. So anyhow, just want to pass that knowledge on. It seems like a lot of the knowledge doesn't get passed on, like I said, but while we're here, we'll go over the 3 basic flames real quick. You got a carburizing, neutral, and an oxidizing flame on your torch. When you light your torch, keep your throttle body off. Your other oxygen lever here is on. Turn that flame up. You see all the black soot? Just keep turning your acetylene slowly up until most all that black soot goes away. You won't get rid of all of it, but you'll get rid of 85% of it. That looks pretty good right there. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this very well, but then go ahead and crack your oxygen open. This will bring into your 3 different flames here. That's going to be so bright you can't even see the secondary flame. Let me try something here. This might work. Oh yeah, that don't work too bad at all. So that's your secondary flame right there. That's your that's your carburizing flame is what it is, your feather flame. You want a carburizing flame if you're soldering or brazing. So you'd have that secondary flame, 4, 5, 6 inches off your primary cones. These are your primary cones right here, the little bright guys. You'd have that secondary flame 5, 6 inches off of that, and then you'd actually have that secondary feather flame on the steel, preheating the steel that you're gonna solder or braze. So, and then your neutral flame, and that's like, if I remember right, about 4,900 degrees, 5,000 degrees, your carburizing flame. So you turn your oxygen on up until you get rid of that secondary flame. That's your neutral flame, it's called. You can hear it hiss maybe a little bit more. Just turn your oxygen up till them secondary feather flame goes away and them primary cones get bright and crisp. That's what you would perform your accelerated rusting factor with, is that flame right there. So, and then your third flame is just oxidizing flame, which is just increasing more oxygen into it. You hear it start hissing more and it doesn't get quite as bright. Oxidizing is like pushing 6,000 degrees. Your neutral flame, when you just get rid of that secondary feather flame, if I remember right, that's about 5,400 or 5,500 degrees right in there. So, and then back to your secondary feather flame. That's your feather flame right there, soldering and brazing. That's your carburizing flame. So you got carburizing, neutral, and then oxidizing. Those are your three flames. So anyhow, like I said, the main point of the video is just to pass on the knowledge as far as the technical term for torching, being technically called accelerated rusting factor. That's what it's classified as, an accelerated rusting factor. So anyhow, pass the knowledge on. Shit like that's getting lost through the cracks anymore. Everybody be safe.